All right, good morning, everyone. This is Ashlee Ellis Smith with the Origins Foundation, and I am so honored this morning to have Governor Brian Kemp with us on our Field Leaders podcast. Governor, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh,
And
honored to be on with you. Looking forward
well,
to it.
you, I don't think there maybe is anyone else in the country who epitomizes what we are trying to do with this Field Leaders podcast because it is supposed to bring perspective from true sportsmen who live it, breathe it, believe in it, who are elected officials or appointed officials and have the ability to influence legislation that affects our ability to enjoy the outdoors and to hunt and fish. And looking back at your track record, it's truly remarkable. And I want to talk about that. But first, I want to talk about you and your family because you do. Okay, so first, congratulations because you were named the 2026 SCI Governor of the Year. And that is a huge honor, I think, because SCI knows their sportsmen.
Well, look, it was a true honor. Just such a great group. Got to go to the banquet in Nashville. It was a lot of fun, and really just the money they're raising too for supporting the cause is. We're always glad to be helpful with those things. We do a lot of that here in the state too. And back to your point about talking to true sportsmen, and well, I check all those boxes of not only pushing good policies to keep our quality of life high, also influence our young people, but also that I just enjoy it. I've been doing it for a long time. I'm continuing to stay focused on the older I get, being able to make sure I can still get out there on the pond or the lake and in the field.
Well, a little birdie whose name might be Mark Williams, a mutual friend of ours, told me that you are an avid bow hunter, wing shooter, all the things, and that you maybe the only thing you might like better than those things were fishing. So, talk to me about how did you get in? Did you grow up hunting and fishing? I mean, what? And then talk to me about your kids because you have three daughters who also love to hunt and fish, right?
Yeah, the bad thing about being an avid bow hunter is two of the three girls can outshoot me on the rifle range and the pistol range. I could probably do a little better than them with shotgun, but it's been kind of fun. But I had my dad growing up played a little bit of golf. He did a little bit of dove hunting, but wasn't a tremendous hunter. And I remember as a kid going on dove shoots and being the bird boy, and really enjoyed that, but never really dove hunted or hunted much with him. But they did give me my first shotgun when I think I was, 13, 14 years old. But I had an uncle on my mom's side that he really got into really all things outdoor. He was a big bass fisherman. He was part of a big hunting club, and so I started going with him a good bit. We were fishing at Clark Hill on the Georgia South Carolina line, between Elberton, Georgia, and Augusta, Georgia, and then I started going to deer camp with him when I was probably 12, 14. Kept going through my teenage years. I used to play football on Friday nights and then go to deer camp after the game, and just loved it. I learned to cook down there. They taught me how to hunt. I started bow hunting down there, and that really led to the rest of my life. I was really an avid outdoors person, and people always ask me, what do you like to do best? And I said, well, it depends on what season it is, because that's what I like. Whatever's in season. That's one reason. The girls and I have had a really good time hog hunting because it kind of extends the hunting year into the winter months when deer
Right.
season's over, and we've had a lot of good times doing that.
Do you think so? I have 8 and 10-year-old little boys, and we are trying to get them outside as much as possible. We live in the city, but we've got a farm, and we're trying to keep that mix. And do you think that growing up and hunting and fishing in the outdoors kept helped keep you out of trouble? I mean,
Oh, for sure. Now, some of the guys I was hanging with, they would get in trouble sometimes. They'd have me driving them around from time to time, and I was trying to keep them out of trouble. So I guess it was working both ways. But it did. it did keep me busy, and I'm a big fan of our young people being busy and having activities, and especially in today's world, getting them from out behind a computer screen or their phone screen, and really letting them realize like there's more to life than scrolling through social media or texting your friends. You can have a lot of good time, experience what the good Lord created, get some exercise, and it also really helps me think when I'm out in the field doing different things. But it definitely did, and I think for our youth, it was one of the great things, and there weren't too many of them that came out of COVID, but one of them was a lot of people got back to hunting and fishing and going to state parks and hiking and doing things like that, which I think was really good for our youth. And our girls, they hunt some with me, but they all, ended up, they played middle school and high school basketball, girls basketball. They showed lambs in 4-H. So we were going to livestock shows and just all those kind of things, keeping the family together, but also keeping those kids busy and keeping them out of trouble. It served them well and us well as parents. I think it's very, very important.
So you guys were one of the first states in the country, and now a lot of states are, I'm not going to say copying the legislation, but speaking of youth, to pass the hunter education in schools legislation. And so congratulations and thank you for that. And schools don't have to put that curriculum in, but they can, correct? And what would you tell them maybe if some of the more urban schools are thinking, well, why do we need to offer that? I mean, to me, even having those kids go through that course may open their mind and eyes to say something that they've never been exposed to before, and get them interested in going to some of those outdoor places. I just think
Yeah.
it's such a great bill.
I have hundreds of pieces of legislation I sign every year, so like it's impossible for me to keep up with every individual one. But when we were going through bill review, and that popped back up on my radar, and I was like, this is really good because it hasn't always been easy to get your hunter safety education and have access to it. So for the schools to be able to do it, especially in communities where there's a lot of those kids in the school that either have shooting sport teams or fishing teams, and they're outdoorsmen, and a lot of people are participating in that. I think it's really really good just to keep feeding more people into the system. It's good convenience for them. But on the flip side of that, like you mentioned, even in the urban schools or suburban schools, one of the things I remember about my hunter safety class that I took whenever it was 40 years ago or something, probably 45 years ago, was muzzle control. It's the most important thing when you're dealing with a firearm, besides, making sure it's unloaded when you're handling it and not using it, is muzzle control. Because even if it is loaded, as long as you're keeping the barrel safe, if something bad happens, it's not going to injure or kill somebody. So like those things are good for every youth to understand, quite honestly. It also teaches them to respect firearms and just learn the safety part of it. So we're excited about that. We put a lot on our educators in today's world, so we're not a state that tries to force too many mandates on schools, because we need our schools to be teaching our kids and not dealing with bureaucratic state mandates. But I do think some of these life lessons, like hunter education and safety education, very important for our youth.
So going back to, you mentioned COVID and how everybody started getting outside because, we were all stuck with our, not necessarily stuck with our families, but I mean, after a while, when you can't leave your house and you can't go anywhere, that is your only escape. And so you get outside, everybody started using our public lands more, using our WMAs. I mean, walking in the parks, walking on the nature trails. And you passed a piece of legislation right there as everyone was coming out of COVID in 2022, the no net loss bill. And I personally think that is one of your legacy pieces of legislation, where you signed that to maintain those public lands in existence so that we don't start losing them. Because right now, as everyone who reads any kind of outdoor news knows, there's a huge fight on the horizon, constant onslaught, especially from a federal level, to potentially get rid of these lands. I mean, we're looking for resources to free up, and the housing crisis in some areas is bad. And why is it so important, in your view, that we protect and keep those public lands available for our citizens?
Well, for me, and when you're governor, you get the opportunity every now and then to fly across our great state. I did that the other day when we were dealing with the really devastating wildfires down in South Georgia, and you get to see how much land we actually really have in the assets that we have. It's pretty amazing to be able to see that. But it also, when we're selling the state, and we've had 4 record years of economic growth in the state, record amount of investment, record amount of jobs we're creating, is creating great opportunity. We've done a lot of that in rural Georgia because, quite honestly, rural Georgia needs it. It's tough making the numbers work on the family farm these days, and I've tried to focus on giving other opportunities where if somebody grows up on a farm in rural Georgia and they may not want to farm, they could still get a job in that community where they can live where they grew up, raise their family there, and that quality of life if that's what they want to do. And so you have that side of the growth equation. But on the flip side of that, one of the things that we're selling every single day, and I did it this morning with the great project that we're working, is it's not just about, how much sewer we got or how much, drinking water capacity we got or, the workforce that we have, but also it's our quality of life. The reason that Georgia's growing, we have people migrating here, is because of our quality of life. A lot of that is because of our, post-COVID boom, because we stayed open and, we didn't have a government that was oppressive on its people. We didn't close our churches down. We kept all of our beaches open, our state parks open, even when every state around us had all their state parks closed, and some, even Florida had some of their beaches closed. And we had people pour into our state during that time. People were driving around the lake that would be on the South Carolina side of a lake or Alabama side. They have to drive around the Georgia side to be able to put their boat in the lake. And so it really made us realize what value that we have in those assets for our people, because that's why people want to live here. I mean, they can have a good paying job, but they also are going to have opportunity to grow a great state park or a boat ramp or, go hiking or even on private lands to lease those to be able to hunt and fish. We got a robust non-game network in the state that is protecting critical species, whether it's, the bird watching crowd or the gopher tortoise crowd. And, all of those things help our quality of life. They also help our water quality and other things which are important. So we're very fortunate in our state to have a great balance, and I think that legislation really speaks to that.
So I have been pheasant hunting in Georgia several times, and it's just for everybody out there listening. You always hear about pheasants in, South Dakota, North Dakota. Go to Georgia to pheasant hunt, and pheasant hunt in those longleaf pines. I mean, there is just nothing more beautiful than those. I'm just going to call them quail plantations because that's what most people
Yeah.
call them. But I mean, it's just such a beautiful part of the state, and the fact that you guys still have some natural quail and pheasant coveys. But I've fished there, I have hunted there, and but my favorite thing might be your gopher tortoises. I mean, I love those little critters, and you guys are doing an absolutely phenomenal job of protecting the habitat for all of these things. Right before you took office, the major legislation, the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund passed, creating that dedicated funding source. And I think that it's the dedicated part that is so important for states, because some states have passed it, and the states that have it are doing phenomenal conservation habitat work throughout the state. And also, I mean, trails for people who don't hunt and fish. There's things for them as well. Like you said, the bird watchers, the kayakers, the hikers. But you guys have been able to do just, I've started looking at the list of things, and it's too long to mention, but I mean, you've
Yeah.
created new WMAs. I mean, you have restored hundreds of thousands of acres of longleaf pine. You have, I mean, it really is too long a list. I mean, people who are interested should Google projects done by the Georgia Outdoor Trust Fund. Can you talk a little bit about that? You've been so supportive of it throughout the years, and really all the sportsman's issues. But some of the states that maybe are waffling on whether, or they've created an outdoor, trust fund, but they haven't made it dedicated. They're doing an annual appropriation from the legislature that goes up and down, or sometimes doesn't go. Why is it important? And do you think it's been successful the way you guys set it up?
Yeah, big supporter of that. It's really interesting too. It's one of the where you had really a broad coalition, some interesting bedfellows, if you will, with kind of the hunting and fishing community, the environmental community, stewardship community, all coming together for this one purpose, and it's benefited everybody. It also, when you have this dedicated funding, people know it's coming every year. So it also, for people to get the grants, it makes it more competitive if you've got private dollars, local dollars matching what the state may do. It makes your opportunity to get awarded one of these things even better. And I get to see the project list every year. There's a group of people that are deciding the projects. I don't necessarily pick the projects, but I get to see a lot of them, and it's been great. It's trails along the river. It may be a new boat ramp, new facilities, protecting lands. Just there's been just a mix of things that have been done. It also speaks to the leadership in the state of Georgia, not just in the governor's office, but the General Assembly, that has been fiscally disciplined, balancing our budgets, so we could take the hit out of the tax revenue back when we passed this legislation, and it didn't really affect or cut any funding to anything else. And it really shows that our good stewardship of taxpayer dollars, but also being able to leverage that with private sector dollars too. So it's been really, really good. Very excited about that.
I way back when I worked for Ducks Unlimited, I would come over to Atlanta and meet with that early coalition trying to get that going. And it took a while. I mean, these things are not easy lifts. So if you're listening from states where you are working to get that dedicated funding passed, stay the course, because it will usually end up paying off. And in Georgia, I think, is one of the most pivotal examples of what can be done if that legislation is passed. Speaking of just all of the projects that are done and people enjoying it, you've had billions of dollars are generated every single year in the Georgia economy. We mentioned that, but there is I feel like, and maybe this goes off and on through the years, and it's always been around, but it seems lately that there's been more and more of an argument, and the North American model seems to be under attack. And I know that you have been a strong supporter of the North American model in the past, and keeping our wildlife open for everyone, that it's, you don't own the wildlife, that it's entrusted to the wildlife agencies, and to take care of that. Can you speak a little bit about why our North American model is important for this country, for the states, and why we should continue to protect that system?
Yeah, I think for me, a couple of things. I mean, number one, it's just access for just the average Georgian that, may not be fortunate enough to own a farm, or, quail plantation, or, a place where they could go privately, but having access to public lands where they can enjoy the same things that those landowners and, people that are paying to go on hunts or fishing trips and other things, that they just have that access. I think that's very important from again, to the quality of life standpoint, but also just what our values are in the state of Georgia. And I think, to me, that's probably the biggest thing. When I was in the legislature 20 years ago, we passed a constitutional amendment that hunting and fishing is a constitutional right in our state. So it's not just in the law that you have access to be able to hunt and to fish. It's a constitutional right, and that'd be very hard to overturn that unless the legislature just went completely different direction than it is right now. So, we've got great protections for that. We've got, great agencies and stewards of our resources, whether it's Department of Natural Resources, Georgia Forestry Commission, a lot of the association, private sector groups, DNR Foundation, the Forestry Association, and there's just a lot of people that, Hunting and Fishing Association, a lot of the Second Amendment groups and other things that are just very protective of that, as they should be. And, I think you're seeing in other parts of the country where those policies are different than they are here. People are fleeing those areas and they're going to a place where they can have, liberty, freedom, express their constitutional rights, and, have good economic opportunity, but also a great quality of life to raise their family in.
So you guys were also one of the first states to pass the constitutional right to hunt and fish. And there are still a number of states that have not passed those. And that is one of the major priorities for a lot of these sportsmen's groups, for us, for SCI, for Congressional Sportsmen's Foundation, for IOTR. And there's this weird pushback that we're seeing in some of these states where even hunters and anglers, when these pieces of legislation or ballot initiatives are proposed or the language is put forth, they're saying, well, we don't really need that. We don't need that. That's not ever going to happen. Or, if we get that in there, then people are going to start attacking it. I personally, as a recovering former lawyer, think that the importance of those amendments cannot be overstated, because what it does is gives both the judiciary branch and the legislative branch just more power to say, no, this is here, this is protected. And so it keeps, because usually there's not just an outright attempt to ban hunting. It's little sliding scales of things. I mean, right now in Oregon, I think everybody in the country knows what's going on, because they do have a proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot to ban hunting and even the right to harvest your own meat. And it is going to get the signatures to go on their ballot. So that's one of those situations. I mean, it's important, right? Like,
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're fortunate here that, you have to have legislative action to be able to put something on the ballot like that, a constitutional amendment, which I'm glad we're a state like that people can't just go get signatures and you get a small group of people that wordsmith something that ends up being a lot different than what people think. And literally you would take that right away or set your state back for a long time. So we're fortunate not to have that model in the state, but there's a lot of, Republican-led conservative states that do have those ballot access laws. So, you just have to be very careful, which really makes the case even more for, putting the constitutional right in there. But, today's political world, it's so different than it was 20 years ago when we passed that. I mean, we had a lot of, mainstream, even kind of center-right Democrats that supported that constitutional amendment. I don't know if they would do that today or not.
maybe not. I mean, because we even occasionally in Georgia see some anti Second Amendment, different bills that crop out, especially of some of the more urban areas. And you're scratching your head, but Georgia does have some. You guys are sometimes split down the middle, and people that haven't grown up around it don't know the ramifications sometimes of what they're passing. But you have a really strong sportsman's caucus in your state, and you always have from at least the time I've been working over there for 15 or so years. And another program you have that is one of my favorite things to attend is the Weekend for Wildlife. And you were there this year. It's I don't even know how to explain this, but it's the foundation runs it, and it's a multi-day experience. And you guys raise millions and millions of dollars for the non-game program, correct? And
Yeah,
why do you
mine.
think
Yeah.
it's like it's so fun? There's so many events. They sell out every year. How has that been so successful?
Yeah, it's been great. It's been kind of a family affair for the Kemps. Our daughters love going. There's great activities. There's fun parties. There's a big auction. It's a fundraising event, but also there's, an educational component to it. So, we have years where people get to go shoot guns that were used. We were shooting a Gatling gun one year. People shooting, automatic military weapons that were used in World War II. I think maybe in World War One. But then also getting to shoot state of the art, ARs, pistols, and other things that, some of these folks never had really ever been able to shoot before. So be able to get out there and educate them is so important to kind of draw them into, even if they don't end up being a shooter the rest of their life, they at least say, hey, I can see how somebody would enjoy that, and we don't want to take that away from them. I've learned a different side of this argument. Just, in prepping for the show today, we're pulling some numbers together. And just since I've been in office and coming in, my first weekend for wildlife was in 2019, we've raised $15 million in, I think, 8 years or 8 weekend for wildlife that has gone to non-game stuff. I mean, one of the things we fixed a natural area with money we raised one year at the governor's mansion. It was just this grown up, just terrible looking back corner of the 15 acres that the mansion is on. And so we put walking trails back there, native plants, native trees. And so now when kids come and do a tour of the mansion, they're just not walking through the inside. They get to go outside. We have bees and chickens. The first flock and the first hive are at the mansion now. And so that was a weekend for wildlife project that Marty, my wife, was in charge of. We also raised the money and bought a bunch of those track wheelchairs, that electric wheelchairs. So folks with developmental disabilities or other disabilities can actually get out into the woods and be able to move around and, go deer hunting, go turkey hunting, go fishing and, so raising money for things like that. And then also protecting non-game species, just a host of different things. And this, again, it's a great coalition of people. You have a lot of corporate partners that give because this is a nonprofit. So you have big companies like Georgia Power, Coca-Cola, a lot of those type folks that are helping fund a lot of these programs. And then you also have just individual donors that are coming in that want to protect different species or protect land, a lot of different things. So it's and they auction off some great trips. So we've been able to take people to show a lot of our assets, like over at Ossabaw Island and a lot of our state parks, where we've been able to do things like trout fish or different things like that. So really, really good stuff.
I did my part this year at the auction. I bought one of the biologists for a day trips for my kids. So we're going to come down to Ceylon and go tag
Great.
some
Yeah.
gopher tortoises. So we're
Well,
excited about
Ceylon's
that.
Ceylon is a great success story too. I mean, a lot of the GOSA funds and other things that this whole group that has been working on supporting Weekend for Wildlife, big part of that, the DNR folks preserving that, an incredible piece of property.
Your DNR does such fantastic work. I mean, all the way up and down the chain. Those folks over there are just really top notch. And it's such a big state with so many divergent species, interests, and just things to keep up with. I honestly don't know how Commissioner Raybon does it, but he's got a great team underneath him. And so you mentioned your wife. I heard you guys love dogs, love to rescue animals. You hunt with them. Do you have dogs still?
We have dogs, not hunting dogs though.
Okay, okay.
I had
Maybe
I
like
had a
me.
lab.
I have a lab that got trained to hunt and then never. She turned into a big fat house dog.
Yeah, well, I had a lab that died the first year I was in office. Man, he was my buddy, but I had got him trained. I was working with him, and he went missing. Came back a day or two later and had a broken leg. And like ever since after that, he was gun shy, and so he ended up just being a pet. And then the kids got to the age where they wanted dogs. We got them trained, and then
They got
it
spoiled.
just went to being pets. But I think maybe after I get out of office, I got a little more time. I may try to get me another retriever.
Speaking of getting out of office, you are winding down your days as governor. What is next for you? What's in your future? Time off or
Well, hopefully a lot of hunting and fishing. you know, no,
good? Are you?
one good thing about being governor, I've gotten invited on a lot of great dove shoots and had opportunities to hunt wild quail and do go on some good fishing excursions. So it's been great, and people enjoy having us, and it helps us be able to see different parts of the state and just hear what's going on the ground. So it's been great, but I'm gonna stay focused. I'm not trying to get ahead of myself here. We still got 8 months left, and I've told the team we cannot take our eye off the ball, because if one bad thing happens, that's what everybody will remember about our 8 years. So I don't want that to happen. So we're keeping our nose to the grindstone and keeping chopping, as we say.
That's awesome. Well, you had a phenomenal session this time. I know you had to make some very hard decisions right there at the end about the deficit, and I don't know how you make the decisions that you do. But as much as you had to put on the chopping block, people still seem to be pretty happy with you overall and your leadership. They're just, I mean,
Well,
Governor, you
I know that was difficult for a lot of the folks in the industry, for a lot of my friends, but I was really put in a difficult position. I mean, the everybody was talking about cutting taxes. We were too. The tax bill got a lot bigger and a lot more expensive, and it passed the last night. And just to be honest with people, I don't think people realized what the cost was going to be, and it ended up leaving a hole in the budget. And so I, either could have vetoed the tax bill, which I'd probably got run out of office if I did that.
right?
But for us to be good fiscal stewards and protect the bond rating in the state, so we have low borrowing rates, and to make sure that people weren't going to. I mean, look, I could have signed the budget and walked away, but next year people would have actually been coming back making cuts to programs, and we didn't do that. We didn't cut any existing programs. We just vetoed some new spending, and a lot of it was things that I support, especially in like GOSA, the feral hog issues, stuff we've done in the past, and we're still funding those like we've done in the past. It's just the new funding we could not afford this year because of the hole in the budget. So very difficult choices. I appreciate people's understanding, and it's one of the tough parts of my job. But I just was not going to leave the state and the next governor, the next General Assembly with a hole in the budget and have to have them come into office and start making cuts and laying people off. That would not be good for our state. And so I just tried to do what I thought was the right thing. And know it's some tough politics, but I think most people understand the position I was put in. Good
Well,
news is, though, we've cut the tax rate again. We got no tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Seniors are getting tax benefit. We're doing a tax refund right now. And so there are a lot of really, really good things that are happening. And, the state will be in the position, hopefully next year when they come back, that a lot of these things will be able to be pushed through or talked about next year.
and those tax cuts that you made will benefit the majority of all Georgians. So,
For sure. Yeah. I mean, that was, a big thing for me, that the way that, lowering the tax rates, raising the standard deduction. I mean, that's helping the people that need it the most, but it's also treating everybody fairly on cutting the corporate rate and the personal tax rate, which, we're in a big competition with some of our neighbors when you think about Tennessee, Florida, North Carolina, and other states that are cutting taxes. So we're trying to preserve the great business environment we got and stay competitive. So we're having good paying jobs in the state and continue to grow our economy, which helps funds these things. And, I believe the legislators that were pushing those issues, they'll be back next year, and hopefully they'll be in a good position to be able to get some of those things to come home. And I'll certainly be supportive of that.
well, we appreciate that. Look, part of being a leader means making hard decisions, and you just have to do it sometimes. And I think people will appreciate and do appreciate your fiscal responsibility, because Georgia's in great shape right now and will be because of the policies that you've put into place right now. So,
Well, we appreciate you. I want to thank you for having me on, and hope your boys catch a bunch of fish out there.
thank you. Thank you, sir. I hope you have a wonderful Memorial Day, and thank you for joining us.
You too. See you soon.
Thanks.
Bye bye.